So back in grade 12, I was learning processing because I was going to write my CPT in processing. And so I had a few months to learn this new language because processing is a visual-oriented language, and we were making a game, and we just weren't going to use Java effects for that. So over the course of the few months, I was just making a bunch of side projects to learn different concepts. A few side projects, a few games, a few of them just messing around. This was one of them that was just trying to learn concepts. So this is Portal Test. It was based off of the video game Portal. I was learning how to move a 2D character. Well, not just move them with a constant velocity, but like acceleration, friction, all that stuff. Because there's nothing built in processing. There's no built-in gravity. So learning how to do jumping, how to accelerate something downwards over time, collide with the floor, like land on stuff. Nothing's built in. I had to learn it on my own, and I just did that by messing around. These two portals, I wanted to create a convincing portal effect, not just teleporting the block from one side to another. So number one, it conserves the velocity, but number two, if you're halfway within a portal, it'll show half of the player on one side, half on the other. And it's actually a really simple illusion. It just draws two blocks, and this breaks the illusion right here. But anyway, I was just trying to figure out how to do movement. Also, if you notice, I'm not really good at art. Everything will either be primary colors, secondary colors, or shades of gray. And you'll see that throughout all of my games, or in this case, tests. But anyway, yeah, this is just me learning how to do acceleration, velocity. Friction actually took me a while to figure out, because it opposes the direction of the player's velocity. Anyway, yeah, this was the first test I made. Another test, I was learning array lists, because I never actually learned array lists. So what it does is it draws just a number of blocks. And it also, so I learned collision based off of a single point. I was trying to figure out how to do collision with like between two shapes. So these are randomly generated blocks, and then this is a player square. And if it collides with any of these other blocks, it turns green. Actually, my array list was originally 200. There we go. So it randomly generates them, and I just wanted to see if I could write a collision, um, well, an if statement, a conditional statement that calculates collision. And I wanted to work with any number of blocks, so I made it randomized just to challenge myself. And to be honest, I just think it looks nice. Um, that's it. Like, again, shades of gray, primary colors, but I thought it looks nice, so I kept it. The next thing I did, I wanted to make a mobile game for the longest time. And this one I put a fair few hours into. MRunner is just, uh, it's a placeholder title. Anyway, so this game I've actually spent a lot of time on because I wanted to release it on the App Store, well, Google Play Store. Turns out developing processing for Android's harder than I thought. That explains the aspect ratio, though. It's entirely vertical for a phone screen. Anyway, it's just a simple space shooter. You got randomly generated stars in the background. This player, who's I've used that like player image before in other projects. And you basically just stop these blocks from reaching the bottom of the screen. There's a bar that fills up at the bottom. Well, the longer you don't shoot, it fills up. Which I wanted to create a dynamic where it's like, oh yeah, you have to shoot these blocks, but the game rewards you for not shooting. You can press E to launch a super bullet, and it just destroys all these other blocks. That's the bonus bar. The bonus bar also fills up faster if you speed up the game by bringing your cursor below that line. That's also the line of defense that you're not supposed to let blocks through. Anyway, I thought I wanted to because I actually wanted to release this game. So I was thinking, okay, how can I set this apart from other games? How can I make things interesting? How can I add tension? I was adding screen shake. I was adding particle effects. I randomized the path of the bullet every time. I wanted to create a little animation for shooting, randomized muzzle flash because I was like serious about um, well finishing this game. It turns out it doesn't run the same on Android. That's also why everything's based on pointing and clicking, because on an Android phone, your only input is the touchscreen and a finger. Um, oh yeah, every time the bonus bar fills up, the player's damage doubles. I was, risk reward and stuff, because like you have to spend longer amount of time without shooting. And if you fire a super bullet, you know, it might save you, but you might not get your double damage. I didn't like these numbers aren't perfect, and I've been tweaking them for the longest time. Let me purposefully die. You'll see that every time a block passes that line of defense, I lose a heart and game over with a score. And yeah, so this was the game that I was working on for the longest time. It's the closest to complete you'll see here. And yeah, I might release it someday. Back to here. So for the CPT I was working on, I was coming up with boss ideas and I thought, hey, maybe a snake thing. These are more just my experiments of like what I could do with processing. Because processing, because it's so simple in terms of code, if you want to draw something, if you want to draw something visually, processing is great. To do something on a terminal or command line, it's kind of crap. But I wanted to get my ideas onto code as quickly as possible. So I was like, okay, what about a snake that moves like this? I was actually trying to solve the problem of how to make a convincing melee effect, right? Where like something swipes across the screen and has a little trail behind it. And these were just all my attempts. Numbers 1 to 4. I eventually came up with something that looked pretty convincing. I believe it's try number 1. Yeah, and then the rest were just like I wanted to create a snake effect. So try number 1 is actually very similar to what Google uses in their Google Slides laser pointer thing. I thought, hey, that looks pretty convincing, like a swipe across the screen. You'll see how that turned out. Here we have square swarms. So the story behind this is that me and my partner were working on our CPT, and I was teaching him how to use processing. So I'd figure something out and then show him how to do it. And so we were talking about player control. Oh yeah, this is also this where I came up with the screen shake method. Anyway, so we were trying to figure out how to do a player with, well, we weren't trying to figure it out. I was trying to show him how to make a player that you control with not just changing its velocity, but accelerating it. And so this is actually a bad example. What it does is it creates a player object, and that player has a velocity, a max velocity. It accelerates at a certain speed. It has a certain friction value, so it slows down. And then if you press Q or E, it spins, and that spinning has an acceleration value, and it also has the same deceleration value. So what we wanted to do here is it basically just created one, and we're like, oh, okay. We created random values because we thought, hey, that looks pretty fun. And so we're like, hey, what if we make 2? So we added 2, and we're like, okay, when you give them different values, that looks kind of cool. So we're like, hey, what if you made 200? And so here's an array list of 200 different player characters, all with different accelerations, max velocities, frictions, and spin speeds. I know it says square swarm and these are triangles, but like I changed them to triangles partway through because triangles looked cooler. And so basically what I do is I just hand this to someone. I said, hey, use WASD, and they would just start staring at this, like trying to figure out what's going on. The player at any given point is in control of the acceleration of every single triangle. And the acceleration amount is different. Their max velocity, their friction, everything is all different, but the player still feels a sense of control. I just thought it looked really cool, so that's why I did it. And I'll probably post a link to my GitHub. I'll post all the code there if you want to try it out for yourself. It's really trippy, but also kind of satisfying. Anyway, and then the last thing I did was swipe. So I was actually just playing with gradients, to be honest. And this was another, I was trying to work on the CPT effects. This didn't end up making it in, but this is actually one of the first things I made in processing. And I was just trying to show someone how to do that. Oh, and then Q and E to rotate something. Anyway, yeah. So these are all just my little experiments in processing. This is how I learned how to use this language. I just started messing around. This is everything.